What up YouTube, your boy Young Mustard is back with another video, and as you can see from the title, I'm continuing my series of ranking the top 10 players at each and every position. But without further ado, drop a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and follow me on Twitter. All of the links for my social media are down below in the description box. Let's just kick things off with number 10. To start us off, we have Pau Gasol. Pau Gasol is easily one of the more skilled bigs in NBA history. With the ability to finish with both hands, score in the post, in the mid-range game, he was a solid passer and playmaker out of the post, and also even later on in his career, he was able to somewhat extend it by adding a decent three-point shot. And I don't think enough is said for his ability to extend his career, not just with his three-point shooting, but taking his level of play even to Chicago. I remember when Pau Gasol came to the Bulls, that was somewhat of a big signing for us because for one, we don't really get big-time free agents, and Pau Gasol was somewhat of a big-time free agent, and he had some solid years, even making an All-NBA team during his time with the Bulls. And when you couple his talent with the fact that he has multiple All-Star teams and All-NBA selections, as well as 2 NBA championships back-to-back, I would add with the Los Angeles Lakers, being the second best player on that championship team, and actually showing up in a lot of key games, and some of those games that Kobe shot inefficiently, and being the backbone of those Laker teams, I gotta say Pau Gasol worthy of being number 10 on this list. But moving on to number 9, we have the Big Blue himself, Bob Pettit. Now, like I say when I talk about players from the 60s and 70s, these were fairly weaker eras in NBA history, especially the 70s, but as it pertains to Bob Pettit, he played in the mid-50s to the early 60s, and though I did not watch Bob Pettit, I was not alive obviously, but from the moment he stepped into the NBA to the moment that he retired, he played at an elite level, led the league in scoring on multiple occasions, including one of the years being in his sophomore season. Coupled that with another 2 MVPs, and I believe the most impressive feat of his entire career, leading his team to an NBA championship over Bill Russell's Celtics and actually outplaying Bill Russell in the NBA Finals. Sure, the NBA had less teams than it has today, and the comp level is not as good as it is today. When you have a resume that he has and you beat the Bill Russell Celtics and outplay Bill Russell, I'm sorry, you're worthy of being in any top 10 list at your position. But moving on to player number 8, we have Kevin McHale of the Boston Celtics. Now, Kevin McHale, I'm not going to act like I'm some Kevin McHale enthusiast, but he's definitely one of the better players on this list, as earlier on in his career, many people said he was a starter masquerading on the bench as he won 2 Sixth Man of the Year awards, and as later on when he became a full-time starter, he made multiple All-Star teams and All-NBAs, and along with being a great offensive player, he was also an elite defensive player as he made 6 All-Defensive teams. So right off the bat, we've established that Kevin McHale was an elite two-way player, an elite player off the bench even, as he made an All-Star team and won back-to-back Sixth Man of the Year awards, and then you couple that with 3 championships with the 80s Celtics dynasty, there really is no debate why he's considered one of the greatest bigs in NBA history. And by the way, another thing that is slept on in Kevin McHale's career is how clutch he was in the postseason. He had some really good playoff runs that I believe went under the radar, such as the 86 year where they won the championship for the final time in that dynasty. He averaged 25 points, 9 rebounds, as well as 3 assists and 2 blocks, shooting 58% from the field, and he did that throughout the entire postseason run. He may not have been Larry Bird on those Celtics teams, but he was definitely without a doubt the second best player in a lot of those playoff runs, and without him, they never would have been as successful as they were. But moving on to player number 7, this one may get a little controversial depending on how you view him, but I have Anthony Davis. Now, Anthony Davis is definitely a very interesting player on this list. For starters, he's not even 30 yet, and the fact that I have him 7th on this list, I'm sure is going to annoy a lot of people because of quote-unquote longevity, but let me just kill that argument real quick. For starters, Anthony Davis' peak is one of the greatest peaks of all time. Like honestly, when you look at what he was able to do on the court, his actual ability when he was at his peak, which he still is at his peak in my personal opinion, but the things that he was able to do, only a couple of players on this list, and they're the ones above him, have been able to do so. Don't give me no Kevin McHale is greater than Anthony Davis when he was never as good as Anthony Davis was. Then you couple that in with the fact that he's one of the greatest defensive players of all time despite not having a defensive player of the year. Only a couple of guys on this list I can say that about. And even though he doesn't have an MVP, he doesn't have a defensive player of the year, he still has multiple all-star appearances in all NBA teams, multiple all-defensive teams, has led the league in blocks on 3 separate occasions, finished top 3 in MVP voting on multiple occasions as well, and has some of the greatest playoff runs of all time, which includes a playoff run to the NBA championship in 2020 where they actually won the title, as he averaged 28 points, 10 rebounds, as well as a block and a half and a steal on 57% from the field, 38% from 3, and 83% at the free throw line. So I don't want to hear anything about quote-unquote longevity when we know Anthony Davis is going to still play at an elite level for a couple of more seasons, and even if his career were to end right now, he has a resume that more than justifies his spot on this list. But moving on to player number 6, we have the round mound of rebound, Charles Barkley. Now Charles Barkley is easily, and I mean easily, one of the most underrated players of all time. And I know it's funny to clown Charles Barkley for some of his takes on TV and his just god-awful predictions, Shaq always clowning him for having no rings. I get it, it's funny to do all of that, but I think a lot of people tend to forget that Charles Barkley was a really good player. I'm talking about a guy in his prime that could give you 25, 12, and 5 in his sleep routinely on seasons unheard of. I'm talking about a guy that in the NBA Finals went back and forth with Michael Jordan, as he had one of the all-time great finals series, averaging 27 points, 13 rebounds, 6 assists, the steal, shooting 48% from the field. It took Michael Jordan averaging 41 points a game in the NBA Finals to put Charles Barkley away, and had Jordan not done that, Charles Barkley would have a ring, and we'd be talking about him as being one of the top 15 to 20 players in NBA history. And aside from just the numbers, if you just watch the film, Charles Barkley was doing things that you did not see bigs at that time do. For starters, he was undersized and one of the greatest rebounders of all time. He was a very underrated passer in the half court, especially out of the post, and even when it just comes to his transition game, the guy was pushing the ball going coast to coast on some plays. It is insane just how athletic Charles Barkley was in his earlier years in Philly and some of the years in Phoenix. The guy was truly a basketball phenom, and had he put in more effort on the defensive end or just had not run into Michael Jordan in the NBA Finals, we will be looking at his career in a whole different light. But moving on to our next player, we are finally in the top 5, and unfortunately, I have Karl Malone. Now, some of you guys might be wondering why I said unfortunately. Honestly, I just don't like Karl Malone. Like, I'm just going to be honest with you. The guy likes little kids, so great player, 2-time MVP. Let's move on to number 4. But coming in to start off our top 4, we have Kevin Garnett, the big ticket himself. Now, depending on how you look at KG, this may be a bit of a controversial spot, but I have to say the 2 through 4 spots were easily the hardest spots for me to rank on this list because, man, it is very close. Like, honestly, I could wake up tomorrow and my mind could be changed, and you could flip these guys. Honestly, it's debatable between the 2 through 4 spot. But nonetheless, KG, easily one of the greatest players of all time. On the defensive end, one could argue he is the greatest defensive player of all time. His ability to switch on the perimeter and defend the paint, only about a handful of players in NBA history rival him in that aspect. And because of how great he was on the defensive side of the ball, not only does he have a bunch of all defensive teams which carried over to his time in Boston, but he is also one of the only 2 players on this list that has won a Defensive Player of the Year award. And when you couple that with the fact that he was also an elite offensive player, not just looking at the numbers, but when you watch the tape, the guy was able to contribute in any way possible offensively outside of shooting the 3 ball. He could post up, he could shoot the mid-range, and also he was a really good passer and playmaker, as his handles helped his ability to create off the dribble and create for others on his team as well. KG was so far ahead of his time, and his efforts helped create unicorns in guys like Kevin Durant, Giannis, Anthony Davis, Joel Embiid, Nikola Jokic. The modern day big that can do it all, Kevin Garnett was one of those guys. And as far as peak goes, Kevin Garnett is easily, and I mean easily, a top 10 peak of all time. Like, for real, if you look at what he did in that 2004 season, it's insane just how good he was. And because of his intensity, he is known as one of the greatest leaders of all time, as his leadership and efforts on the defensive side of the ball helped the Boston Celtics win a championship in 2008. Now, as far as why I don't have him higher on this list, for starters, Kevin Garnett in his prime was missing the playoffs or losing in the first round for a good portion of his career. And it's not just the fact that he was losing in the first round, it's the fact that he was running into a lot of other players that were just straight up outplaying him. Honestly, for example, look at the 2000 series against the Dallas Mavericks. Kevin Garnett averaged 24 points, 19 rebounds and 5 assists, right? Solid numbers, but shot just below 43% from the field and 72% at the free throw line. And it's not like he didn't have help, because Chauncey Billups and Wally Szczerbiak averaged 20 points on decent to great efficiency in their own rights. Meanwhile, the guy that Kevin Garnett was guarding on the opposing team, Dirk Nowitzki, averaged 33 points, 16 rebounds, 3 steals, shot 53% from the field, 73% from 3, and nearly 89% at the free throw line. It really is insane just how much Dirk outplayed him, and keep in mind the Timberwolves got swept in that series. And you can go through multiple series in Kevin Garnett's career where he was just straight up outplayed by opposing players at his own position. And when you couple that with the fact that he missed the playoffs for 3 straight years in the middle of his prime, I'm sorry, I cannot give him an excuse for that, especially when there's a consensus that his peak is one of the greatest peaks of all time. If you're that good, you should be able to at least lead your team to the playoffs, especially if you have 3 chances in a row to do so. But nonetheless, I'm not trying to shit on KG too much, because in my personal opinion, he's still an all-time great player, and you could easily argue that he's the 2nd greatest power forward on this list. Like I said, 2 through 4 is definitely interchangeable, but that's just my reason why I have him at number 4 and not anywhere higher. But moving on to player number 3, I have Dirk Nowitzki of the Dallas Mavericks, and I gotta say, I believe Dirk is one of the most underrated players of all time. Like, I've even made a video about it in the past, the card should be on the screen right about now, but I don't believe enough is said about how impressive Dirk Nowitzki's career is. For starters, I think a lot of people are used to older Dirk where he relied on his skill and his post moves, his 3-point shot, and they just either weren't alive or just don't care to look up film on how good Dirk was in his younger years. It's not to say that his older years weren't good, but when he was younger, he was far more athletic than people gave him credit for, even able to put the ball on the floor and use his athleticism to blow by some slower defenders in the front court. And secondly, when you look at his impact on the game, it just goes without question, as I believe that Dirk and Kevin Garnett are the 2 most influential bigs in NBA history, especially on the modern game. I talked about KG earlier with his defensive switchability, but when you look at a guy like Dirk on the other hand, it's really the opposite, because on the offensive side of the ball, there was really nothing that Dirk could not do. He could take it to the basket and use his size to abuse smaller defenders. He could operate in the post with a plethora of moves at his disposal, and even when he got to the free throw line, he was usually cash money, as there are multiple seasons that he has hovering around or even over 90% at the charity strike. But the most impressive and influential part of his game has to be his ability to shoot from behind the arc, as he's won a 3-point contest and the numbers back it up, the film backs it up. No matter how you look at it, Dirk really changed the game with his 3-point shooting. And when you look at his accomplishments, he has an MVP to his name, multiple All-Star appearances in All-NBA teams, but the 2011 championship is easily, in my opinion, the greatest ring of all time. Not only did he stay in Dallas and be committed to them, taking all those pay cuts for all those years in order to win with the team that drafted him, which really just adds to the story of that ring, but the road to the championship. I gotta say, over the years, LeBron fans have tried to shit on that ring by taking credit away from Dirk and saying that team was way better than it actually was. But look, I'm gonna be the first one to tell you guys, people will always be ready to take away credit from the guys who beat LeBron, and Dirk is a part of those guys, because in 2011, you had to have just been there. Nobody even thought the Mavericks were going to get out of the 2nd round, much less win the NBA championship. That team was not a great team from top to bottom. It was Dirk and a bunch of other role players. And as good as those role players played in key moments, whether it was with defense, 3-point shooting, they are role players. They need a superstar to lead them, and Dirk without question was that guy. Whether it was stepping up with key shots in the 4th quarter or being the consistent offensive option when nobody else was able to do so, Dirk consistently got the job done in each and every single round, including the NBA Finals. They beat the Portland Trail Blazers, they were favored, fine. They beat the Los Angeles Lakers though, who were coming off of back-to-back NBA championships and 3 straight finals appearances. Not only did they beat them, but they swept them. And in the conference finals, going up against the Oklahoma City Thunder, who had Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook as well as James Harden, they beat them as well in 5 games. And then going to the NBA Finals, a series that they were not favored in any way, shape, or form, going up against the Big 3 Miami Heat in their primes, LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh. It was Dirk, Tyson Chandler, Jason Kidd, JJ Barea, Shawn Marion. Yeah, does that sound like a great cast? No, it is Dirk and a bunch of other role players. And yes, I understand Jason Terry had a great finals, but it was a great finals for his standards. The guy didn't even average 20 points throughout that entire playoff run. And say what you want about those NBA finals and how good Jason Terry was, it was Dirk that was sealing the deal fourth quarter after fourth quarter after fourth quarter. And that is why he won the finals MVP and had one of the greatest, and I believe the greatest, playoff run in NBA history. And because he didn't need a super team to win his first championship, and only championship I should add, that's why I have him over Kevin Garnett as number 3 on this list. But moving on to number 2, this is where it's going to get a little bit controversial. I have Giannis Antetokounmpo. Now, before people come at me with their longevity pitchforks, let me tell you guys one thing. Giannis is 26 years old and has accomplished more than all the guys below him. He has a Defensive Player of the Year, he has All-Stars and All-NBAs, and sure, he doesn't have as many as some of the guys below him, but similar to Anthony Davis, Giannis has played at a level that a lot of the guys, if not all of the guys below him, have not been able to play at. As on the defensive side of the ball, one could argue he is the best defender of his generation. The DPOY and all defensive teams are a validation of that, and even if you just watch these last playoffs, especially these NBA Finals, he further cemented that fact. And considering that he just had one of the all-time great playoff runs that I believe only Dirk can compare to, combined with an all-time great finals series, 2 all-time great moments like the block on DeAndre Ayton and the lob from Jrue Holiday, and then he capped it off with a picture-perfect closeout game of 50 points, 14 rebounds, 5 blocks on 64% from the field, and even at the free throw line was the embodiment of clutch, as the knock on Giannis has to be his free throws, and at the free throw line he made 17 of his 19 attempts, shooting nearly 90% at the free throw line. And considering that he did all of this before even turning 27 years old, he could retire right now, and he is greater than all the guys below him in my personal opinion. I don't care about longevity, you can shove that down your throat all you want, but in my personal opinion, I don't see how Giannis is not the second greatest power forward of all time with a resume like that, and it only makes it that much more impressive that he really did all of this in a 5 to 6 year window. It's insane, honestly. But let's move on to our final player coming in at number 1, and was there any question? It is the big fundamental himself, Timmy D. Duncan. Now, I don't think this deserves that much of an explanation, but let me just give you guys the quick rundown. There was nothing Tim Duncan couldn't do on the basketball court outside of shooting threes. On the defensive end, he's one of the greatest defenders ever and actually has a case to be the greatest defensive player of all time. And the longevity at the defensive end, it's insane. Literally from the moment he walked in the league, essentially to the moment he retired, he was an elite defender, even making a first-team all-defensive team in 2014. The guy was literally playing elite defense from the moment that Michael Jordan won his last championship to the moment that LeBron faced him in the NBA Finals in 2014. It is insane the longevity that Tim Duncan has, and you don't see stuff like that every day, obviously. And even on the offensive end, I don't think Duncan gets enough credit for how skilled he was. There was not a single post move he could not do. He was a great passer and playmaker out of the post, and even when you look at a lot of those playoff runs, he was carrying the Spurs a lot more than people think, as when they won the first championship, David Robinson was coming off of a career-altering injury and was never the same, and in the second championship, Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili, they were rookie and sophomore players that did not perform all that well throughout that entire postseason, but yet they still won the championship in 2003. And when you combine that with the resume that he has of 5 NBA championships, 3 finals MVPs, a back-to-back MVP winner, there really is no debate on him not only being number 1 on this list, but a top 10 player in NBA history. But that concludes this video. This was a very long video. I'm sorry you guys, but I had to get into my bag. If you enjoyed it, make sure you drop a like to show some support to me as a content creator to help me out with that algorithm. Subscribe to this channel if you're new and press the bell for post notifications. Follow me on social media. The links are down below in the description box. This is your boy Young Mustard signing out. Y'all stay safe and have a blessed day. Peace.